My name is Janelle James, and I'm a reporting intern at HOMTV. Today, I will be interviewing Clerk Brett Dreyfus about the Absentee Voter Counting Board. Can you explain what the opt-in to Ingham County Absentee Voter Counting Board is?
Sure. So an absentee voter counting board, or an AVCB, was created a few years ago, about 4 years ago, become implemented widely throughout Michigan as a means to deal with a larger increasing number of absentee voters ballots that needed to be processed. So this is a group that actually meets specifically on election day, opens the envelopes, processes all of the absentee ballots, and then tallies them. And then they come back to the township clerk's office, and we then transmit the results. So it's really a very necessary component of the election process. And the people that work the absentee counting board are sequestered. They're kept in a separate room all day long because they're looking at live ballots. So when they come in there starting at 7 a.m., they can't leave until possibly midnight, 2, 3, or 4 in the morning. They have to stay 15 or 20 hours continuously because there are live ballots being processed in those counting board rooms. So it's really important. The goal would be to try to get the ballots processed as quickly as possible. And so we have absentee counting boards' goal is to try to be able to find more and more efficient means of counting the ballots. The county is going to be offering an option to allow different municipalities to join in together and do a completely county-wide absentee counting board that can have a better scale of efficiencies. And maybe through the use of concentrated equipment and people all in one location, it can get done a little bit faster. There have been issues in the past with programming issues and transmission issues, so sometimes these technology things happen. But this goal of the county board is to make everybody have the election results faster and easier for everyone involved.
How many people will be needed to run this counting board? Will you be taking volunteers, or are there people in the city council who will be running it?
Great question. All of our elections are run by basically people who step up to the plate, and they're called election inspectors. So we have a team right now of anywhere, it varies in any election, but between 150 and 200 people that staff all of the polling locations on election day, anywhere from 4 to 7 people in any precinct, and we have 19 precincts across Meridian. And the AV counting board is staffed with the same kinds of individuals. And there are currently we've had anywhere up to 14 people that signed up to be on the AV counting board. It's going to be a lot more now because the numbers are a lot larger and the county wants more people. So we're going to be using 25 people in the role of AV counting board election inspector this election. And anybody can sign up by simply filling out an application to be an election inspector, and it's found on our township website, meridian.mi.us. Go to the clerk section and just complete the simple application to be an election inspector. And you can take a picture of it or scan it and email it back to me. And then we'll be able to put you into the roster for, if we have an open position, wherever we can, we can place you where you either at a polling location or on the absentee voter counting board.
Is this a paid position, or is this strictly volunteering?
It is a paid position. You're paid $11 an hour to do that. Plus you get paid for training. There's typically up to a 2-hour training, and get paid $20 for training as well.
How effective do you think this counting board will be?
Counting board is extremely effective. In the August primary, which we just had, we processed more absentee voter ballots than ever before. We processed 11,000 absentee ballots. That's a huge, huge increase over the past. Previous elections, when I came on board in 2012, we had about 22,800 people voted absentee ballot. I've been encouraging absentee ballot use from the very beginning. I did a mailing to get people to join our permanent list so they get ballots before every election. So I've done a lot to promote the whole concept. And we went from 2,800 to about 3,200 to about 5,500 to about 6,200 to about 8,000 to 10,000. And now I believe we're approaching 16,000. So it's a huge increase. Everybody on that list gets an absentee ballot. And the majority of people who receive an absentee ballot vote it. So you have a much higher turnout in elections where there's a lot of absentee ballots being cast.
Do you think that there will be more absentee voting this election because of COVID-19?
Absentee ballots in the August election last month was at 83%, again, which is an astronomical number of all the total. Only 17% of the total voters showed up at the polls. We're predicting a minimum of 80% by absentee ballot for the November election. So we're looking at 16 to 18,000 ballots by absentee ballot and maybe 2 to 4,000 people showing up at the polls, something like that. Those numbers could be off, but that's a best guess estimate of what we're working with.
Do you see this counting board having any other impacts on election day?
The absentee counting board going with the county does change something in a way that is, a step backwards, unfortunately. But it's there's always a give and take with things. Life is filled with compromise. Up through before we had an absentee voter counting board in 2016 and before, for 10, 20 years beforehand, whenever absentee voter ballots came into the township, we sent them out to the precincts to be counted on election day at each local precinct. So if you lived in precinct 5, let's say, and somebody in your precinct came in and turned in an absentee voter ballot, we at the clerk's office would turn around and have to deliver that to the jurisdiction on election day, or just process it and package it to take with them when they open up the polls on election day. When we got an absentee counting board in 2016, we stopped doing that. We no longer had to have any precincts do processing of absentee ballots. And that was a great step forward. That made it easier for everybody at the polling location. It meant more security of the ballot. It made us what we call just better efficiencies of the throughput of the ballot itself. Now, by doing a countywide AV counting board, unfortunately, any ballots that come in starting at 4 p.m. on Monday, the day before the election, and all day election day up till 8 p.m., we're going to have to deliver it back to the precincts like we did in the old days now. So that means a bunch of deliveries. At least we can do it. We're going to count on at least 2 deliveries, maybe 3 during the course of the day to every single precinct. So you can see that that's a lot of trips going all over town. But because of the fact we're going to be processing them in Mason, off-site, and all, we just have to go back to the basic way of doing it. So that's one of the requirements to participate is daily delivery on election day to all the precincts. And that's the biggest drawback. And that was the only reason initially I hesitated doing this. I was my discretion as township clerk as to whether or not we should do this. And in the beginning, I was concerned about that delivery of ballots to the AV ballots. But I came to the conclusion that it's been done effectively for decades. We can do it again. And the benefits far outweigh it than this one aspect of it. So I gave it a green light and to move ahead with it.
As far as this being a countywide counting board, is this for this election this year, or will this be for all elections to come?
Well, we always have an absentee voter counting board, but it's administered by Meridian Township exclusively. This particular one is a joint one administered through the county, and it's the contract. We sign an agreement, and it's only for this one election. In the future, I'm sure there's an option they'll be developed to maybe do a number of these, or maybe not. And maybe each election you can choose to opt in or not in every single election. So you have to sign on for each individual one. It may go down that road either. But in this particular case, it's just for November 3rd, 2020.
Because you are expecting more absentee voting this year, will you modify the counting board to fit those absentee ballots?
Yes, good question. The AV counting board numbers require, the agreement that's going to be signed with the county requires that we provide one election worker for every 800 AV ballots that we've mailed out. So if we've mailed out 16,000 ballots, we've already anticipated that we need to provide 25 election inspectors to staff the AV counting board in Mason. So that changes because that numbers go way up from the 14 that we scheduled previously. So that the biggest accommodation change in logistics is providing 25 people. The second is that we're going to be contributing 2 high-speed envelope openers. And that may seem like no big deal, and somebody might laugh when they hear that, like, oh, what, an envelope opener? Well, these are industrial envelope. They open like 2,000 envelopes an hour. They're like machines that are like, and the things just go through, really super fast. We need that to run an election. That like becomes an integral part of the election, is something that can open up absentee ballot envelopes very quickly. We have 2 of those, and we had to do repair work on them last year. we figured out how to put some belts on and do some tweaking, and they ran perfectly well for the August election. And we're going to be donating that as part of the use of our, contributing that to the county for the election, along with our high-speed scanner. That's a $35,000 piece of equipment, and that'll be one that we use usually just for us, but we're going to contribute so that it'll run as in conjunction with maybe several others as part of like a network configuration of these high-speed scanners. And that also should help to speed things up as well.
Do you find it easy to recruit people to be on the county board or work the elections?
It has been a challenge for a number of years. When I first started in 2013, my first year that I recruited people. People were interested to some extent, but it didn't seem to be a pressing need, and people felt somewhat, there's all sorts of important things going on. Obviously, hot button million issues were going on, but for whatever reason too, it wasn't as important until it really noticeably changed in 2016. I think with the election of Trump, on the federal level, changed the federal level dynamics, filtered down to the state level and to the local level, and people became more passionate about the election process. I think there have been concerns because the president has made a lot of inflammatory comments about the election process and about AV ballots, all of which pretty much have been disproven as completely false, exaggerated, or just completely made up statements that have really no bearing in reality. So AV elections have been around, absentee voting elections have been around since the Civil War. And Trump himself uses absentee voting to vote from his home to back on his home state. And if he didn't trust it, it would make no sense that he would himself be using it. So what happened is that people decided they want to get more involved in elections, and more people wanted to sign up to become election inspectors. So my job became a little easier starting in 2018. I think after 2 years of what people have seen in the United States, people here just said, hey, I really want to participate more. Now in 2020, I thought with COVID that there'd be a complete drop off, but it has not been the case. We've had a big influx of people saying, count me in, just as long as what safety measures are in place. And we try to keep people 6 feet away. We wear a mask. We do that. We have wipe down procedures. We do the basics. We can't go much beyond that, but we do what we can to follow the protocols. As far as I'm aware and what we've done so far, there haven't been any reported illnesses, any COVID or anything based on the election and what we've done in this last election. So we are excited about about this and cautious, and it's going to be huge numbers. But we do need more election workers, and anybody wants to be an election. It's called an election inspector, is the same as an election worker, and they're interchangeable terms. They can also be called a poll worker. That's a third term. And you can also be an AV county board member, but it's still one of those same 3 terms that we're using. And you just go to the Meridian Township website, complete the simple application, fax it, email it or scan it, and then email it back to me, and then you'll be placed in the list and probably be able to use you in this election. We'll probably be able to place you at a precinct. We still have a need for people. And again, the trainings will be occurring in October. I think predominantly on Thursdays is when we're going to be planning most of our trainings. So you'll get an email, and it'll explain the logistics of what dates you can pick to come for training.
Now, if I was an AVB board member, can you walk me through a day of what I will be doing?
Activity on the AV counting board is a little more routine and mechanized than what election workers do at the polling location. At the polling location, there's about 5 or 6 different main tasks that different workers could be assigned to, such as checking ballots or entering information in the computer or issuing ballots and things like that. And the AV counting board, the main tasks involve opening envelopes, pulling out ballots, straightening them out, removing the tabs, putting them in piles, running them through a tabulator, and then pulling out errors and duplicating ballots that are incorrect, and then sorting out the final ballots and sorting out the results, basically doing the compiled results. That's basically the tasks.
Now, how long will that take to do for one ballot?
It's hard to say because it comes in fits and starts. There's just different ways it goes through, and it's never as smooth as we would like it to be. We'd like it to be like a machine, but we're dealing with human beings, and the equipment itself sometimes has its own ways of stopping suddenly and spits things out. If you randomly get a couple of errors that, like, let's say a voter had ambiguous marks on the ballot, which is putting stray marks outside the area that you would normally complete the oval circle. Let's say somebody circles the whole thing. That happens, believe it or not, quite a bit. When you say fill in the oval, some voters circle the entire name of the candidate. That's filling in the oval. Some people fill in the whole thing. They'll actually circle black a whole thing with their pencil. It's incredible, or their marker. It's pretty amazing. We can duplicate those because we have a Democrat and Republican together, always members of the opposite party, and they can determine voter intent. It's clear if you circle a John Smith's name that John Smith is the person you want, so you can duplicate it correctly. And so one of the tasks involved is doing that. If you have 3 or 4 of those in a coincidence in a 10-minute period, it's going to slow things down a little bit, so the numbers will be a lot lower. But basically, we should be able to do the 11,000 ballots should have been able to be processed last time by midnight, starting at 7 a.m. And unfortunately, again, there were some equipment issues. I'm thinking that really didn't get done till a number of hours later. And then there was transmission errors that had nothing to do with the tabulation. That had to do with incorrect software the county provided, that they just happened to have some, erroneous software. And so we couldn't transmit it till the afternoon of Wednesday, even though everything had been done, the previous night before. So here's the goal. Just in summary, I know I gave a pretty long answer there. The goal is you want to have everything done as soon as possible after 8 p.m. But with 16,000 ballots, and it could be 18,000 AV ballots, it would be wonderful if we were done at midnight. It would be wonderful to be completely done, counted, transmitted, and good to go at midnight. I'd say that's a home run if we can do that. Some communities will not have the results till 8 a.m. the next day, I can assure you, or more, if there'll be issues or problems come up. It'll be involved for some communities.
Well, I think those are all the questions that I have. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Yes. For people who are interested in voting by absentee ballot and early voting, here's how it works. You have 40 days before the election that absentee early voting begins. So you can actually come into the Township building starting September 24th and request an absentee ballot anytime between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. And then we will issue you an absentee ballot. You can take it with you, or you can vote right there in the building. That's called early voting, and you do that all the way up till 4 p.m. on Monday, the day before the election. Okay? So that's absentee. You can also take the ballot with you if you just want to take it home with you and vote later. Absentee ballots are going to be mailed out starting September 24th. That's the 40-day period. All the people on our permanent AV list and everybody who requested one for the August election that checked the box to get one in November will receive a ballot automatically. They do not need, and they're not going to get an application for a ballot because they already completed one. We're getting that question a lot, and voters need to realize you're all set. You're going to get a ballot automatically at the end of this week. Post office reports, it's going to take up to a week to get the ballot. So voters should wait till at least October 1st or 2nd before they contact the clerk's office if they haven't received it yet. If you wait till October 2nd, then we know something's up and we'll automatically issue you a new ballot. That's really the main information to give at this point. And you can return your AV ballot anytime up till 8 p.m. on election day.
Thank you, Clerk Dreyfus, for joining us today. For more information, you can visit HOMTV.net.